Writers, if you sometimes feel that your writing is either too flat or too dense, I've got two useful tools for your writer's tool belt, Parataxis and Hypotaxis. Speaking broadly, Parataxis refers to minimal connections between sentence elements, and Hypotaxis refers to a whole lot of connections between those sentence elements. And there's times when you may want to deploy one or the other. So let's take a look at some examples from literature to see what these tools can accomplish in your own writing. Parataxis, or again, those minimal sentence connections, became very popular during modernism, deployed by writers like Hemingway, Ezra Pound, and Samuel Beckett in order to create an almost impressionistic or even imagistic quality in their writing. This is because parataxis refers to phrases or sentences placed next to each other in positions of equal importance and equal emphasis, but without connection. These can be simple sentences or phrases within a sentence, but first let's take a look at an example from Hemingway's short story, Big Two-Hearted River. Nick was happy as he crawled inside the tent. He had not been unhappy all day. This was different, though. Now things were done. There had been this to do. Now it was done. It had been a hard trip. He was very tired. That was done. He had made his camp. He was settled. Nothing could touch him. It was a good place to camp. He was there in the good place. He was in his home where he had made it. Now he was hungry. On the surface, this seems absurdly simple, but notice how immersive it is. It brings a reader directly into the story without much mediation because these short declarative sentences are given equal weight. They seem to be mimicking for the reader the way that thoughts simply occur to an individual without any real order or meaning. The sentences don't have any sort of connection to each other, no transition from one to the next, lending this example that sort of stream of consciousness quality as it patterns simple thoughts and welcomes us into those thoughts. But let's also take a look at an example of parataxis where it isn't sentences, but rather phrases within a sentence. And to do so, let's take a look at a passage from Cormac McCarthy's The Crossing. He ate the last of the eggs and wiped the plate with the tortilla, and ate the tortilla and drank the last of the coffee and wiped his mouth, and looked up and thanked her. We have these phrases joined with the conjunction and, but still notice how none of these phrases takes weight or precedence over any of the others. They're all equal, sequential, and noticeably bare. It might seem very simple, and in some ways it is, but the juxtaposition of the simplicity of eating a meal in this sort of liturgical use of parataxis suggests that there is real meaning here, if only the reader is willing to step down and consider it. That's why parataxis can be a really useful tool if you feel like you tend to overwrite or your writing gets too dense. Try some parataxis in critical moments in your writing to clear it up with a new, simpler rhythm. On the other hand, maybe you feel your writing is getting a bit too flat, too minimal, too much parataxis. Maybe you want to add some flair or else exhibit a hierarchy of meaning and abundance of connections in your sentences. That's where hypotaxis comes into play. Hypotaxis is the opposite of parataxis. So instead of a democracy of sentences or phrases given equal emphasis, hypotaxis is going to structure a sentence, often with subordinating conjunctions, in order to demonstrate complex relationships of space, time, cause, and effect. Hypotaxis is going to create a much more complicated sentence structure, but that's on purpose. So let's take a look at this passage from James Baldwin. In later years, particularly when it began to be clear that this education of mine was going to lead me to perdition, he warned me that my white friends in high school were not really my friends, and that I would see, when I was older, how white people would do anything to keep a Negro down. The main clause in this passage, the main subject and verb, is he warned. But it's tucked inside reflection, a very deliberate reaching into the past with all sorts of qualification. Not only does this create layers of meaning within a single sentence, but there's some psychological realism at play here. He's describing something that, as a child, may have seemed simple, but in retrospect is far more complicated, and the sentence captures that sentiment.